you are all well, and he hopes that you are all happy. And so in terms of practice, of course, wherever we are, whatever our situation is, it's really important to keep things stable, continuous. So as we investigate the Dharma, it is like a kind of a beautiful garden of many different things. And so as we listen to the Dharma, as we cultivate the Dharma, our main task is try to make sure that our mind does not get distracted by other objects, yeah? Yeah. And so Buddha Shakyamuni gave an instruction that whether one is one's own friend or whether one is one's own worst enemy, this is a responsibility that lies in your hands. It's not determined by something from the outside. So with this knowledge in mind, right, that we can become our own best friend or we can become our own worst enemy, right? That is why we put our effort forward in the study and practice of the teachings. So with that awareness, then we will proceed with the teaching mind training with the practice of mind training. And so Geshe said he won't give a long introduction, a long preliminary today, because a lot of the things are going to be explained when we get to the actual text. But as a preliminary, we want to calm our body and mind. So we'll just do a brief contemplation to kind of set the body and the mind in states of neutral equanimity. So when we place the mind in this state of equanimity, it's a little bit like when the wind stops blowing over the ocean. Once the wind stops blowing, we'll see that the waves naturally subside and a state of calmness is restored. In the same way, with placing our mind in this state of equanimity, we create a calm stillness. So to use another ocean analogy, just like there are many fish and creatures beneath the surface of the ocean that are moving about, they don't disturb that surface with waves. In the same way, we want to make sure that our mental projections, our thoughts and feelings do not disturb the still surface of the mind. To do that, we place it in that state of equanimity.
Gyalse Chenpo San Dogere, Chi Rojila, Yama Yuba Noji, Nogi Senja Rojila Yuta, Tremeliava, Rizezon Yamare, Zumai Sumbachi. She Gyalse Chenpo, Nume Rojila Yamaris, Chinuma, Zumamiaba. Or then Noji Nogi Sayutane, Roji Zuma, Rojigesa, Yapochi Sumbachi.
So just like water's natural nature is something pure, is something untainted, right? It's water is not the nature of the dirt or the dust within it. In the same way, the nature of our mind is something untainted, unstained, in the nature of pure luminosity.
Megi Chamambo, Giare Tene, and it's Hela, you take Uncle Lower, Mount Secoro, Roja Tenis.
So there are many fetters or many stains, right? Unwholesome thoughts and appearances, but these are adventitious, which means they are not actually the nature of the mind. They're something that can be removed or peeled away.
Second, as the Rijia is a Roja Gesa, Tomalo, Rujia is a Anishumba Tashima, Niji Tashima. Shira Tashman, I just have Terran.
And the fact that the nature of the mind is this pure luminosity, and it is not the nature of the defilements or the afflictions, the fetters that cover it, these adventitious things. This is the very reason that by tapping into the mind's nature, we can bring forth and fully perfect love, compassion, wisdom, and so forth.
Yapo, May Leva Yapota, say Yapo, like a Cheshu Teta, the detachment where they like that's all so much.
This human rebirth, this human body, this human mind can ultimately have meaning if we tap into this potential and use it to achieve liberation.
This woman which you watch that, second dinner, so I teach it so much.
And with that wish, then, from the very depths of our mind, in other words, the bottom of our heart, let us single pointedly make requests to the holy beings to be able to do that.
Lama Yetota, so you should say Kanga, so Palama, Zini Deo, so much.
And imagine that as we make these requests or prayers, we've invited the Guru, deity, all of the assembly of Buddhas and Bodhisattvas as the field and the place in front of us.
Yeah.
So we'll recite the prayers. Oh, yes, sir.
That is that you
Chom den de jin she ba dra chom pa yang da ba zo pe song ge re ba tang sham su dem ba de wa she ba ji den gen ba ge bu du we ka lu gyu la na me Tenpa Sangye Chomdende Pegyawa Shakya Tupala Chazelo Chede Gyabsu Chi Tenpa Chondende Dijin Sheba Drachompa Yang Daba Zobe Sanje Reba Dang Shasu Denpa Dewa Sheba Shiden Chemba Shebu Dove Kalu Jowa Lana Mepa Lada Mi Namgi Tenpa Sangye Chondende Pejawa Shakya Tubala Chanselo Chede Kyasu Chi O Tenpa Chondende Dijin Sheba Drachompa Yang Dapa Zobe Sanje Ripa Dang Shasu Denpa Dewa Sheba Shiden Chemba Chebu Dewe Kalo Jorwa Lana Meba Lada Mi Namgi Tenpa Sangye Chondende Pejawa Shakya Tubala Chazelo Chede Kyasu Chi Ho. Short mandala offering. Soji Begi Joshi Bedo Ra Ra Le Nama Dajika Idam Guru Ratnam Mendalaka Niryatayami Chidang Sogi Chenam La Changchu Pardu Dani Kyasu Chi Dagi Chenyen Gipe Sunam Gi Jola Penji Sangye Drobar Sho Chidang Sogi Chenam La Changchu Pardu Dani Kyasu Chi Dagi Chenyen Gipe Sunam Gi Jola Penji Sangye Drobar Sho Chidam Sogi Chenam La Jangshu Bardu Dani Kyasu Chi Dagi Chenyen Gipe Sonam Gi Jola Penjir Sangye Droba
Ota tengo ta nganzo Tokme shawa, Tokme shayi ka isa ta tengo. Ana keche te shawa tsewa yina.
So if we were to speak a little bit about the activities that were important at the beginning,
Ota tangi laba nojire, ane soso gata, ane danyi da gengeyi sayate, soso pake seyo po somba sombo shurindo toba yina, soso gengenda wo chando yare.
so as we mentioned before, there was this saying about one can be one's worst enemy, one can be one's own virtuous friend. So if we are able to train the mind and go in a proper direction, we become our own virtuous friend, our own teacher.
다 소소 tani somba ngemba shurindo ni ta marere senje rere le ta pake somba ngemba cheba yina yo. Soso tsewa yes ne kanela no mala, soso darendo yare. 아, 됐어. 녀도 가고. 소소 머리를 이나래 생제 레레를 좀 먹냐 봐. 슈런도와 이나요.
Mhm.
태고모데
Yeah, dikoso.
어때이자 소소소가 되니 다른도 요아레스.
Ale.
소소소를 때와 요아서는 배도 요아마레스. 아, 괜찮아.
Sorry. 대신dak chikla na.
소소체는 쓰고 매바지.
Nga se opo me basema. Sorry.
세시워서 야범 예금만데 괜찮아. 소소체라 매간다고. 소소 세제 연다 멋지래 이나서 망년 봐서나.
Yeah.
아제.
Mi chikina sampang nyamba sa.
소망년 봐 소노토나.
Yeah, yeah.
세제 몸벌 소망년 봐 제바 이나요.
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
아니 소소소 다른도 요아레스.
Ale. So also
Ikaw,
if we have mari nga hakumas nga soso sem nyampala teni mi jendak din so dra chagire duas. Konso yang sampang nyampala yere ro.
소소 계제시기도 왔어. 뭐 연다 줘도 맞지.
Teni jendak kola karela.
시워서 연다로 소망년 봐 소소 소노토나.
Ale.
소소
Loso.
계제시기도 와.
Ale. Loso.
소소 게 소소 다차도 내지 자기야.
Yeah. So even if Geshe is saying that we become our own enemy, sort of regardless of sorry.
세시워 소소 단도나 간디슨도 그래. 소소소 니엔도는 간디슨도 그래.
So we have to think about the way that we become our own enemy. We also have to think about the way that we become our own virtuous friend.
소치 센지 찔 세와시 바이나. 센지 찔 내와시 바이나. 때깔레지 좀 만도. 근데 소소소 다른도 그래.
And so if we show kindness to one sentient being, then we become our own virtuous friend. If we harm one sentient being, then we become our own enemy.
소소소 말 괜찮아. 일라와데. 다 던디지 이자 다 난도 너무 따와 이나 다 대원데키 강가래 되네 이나요. 이절소 망해 바지 이절 내바시나.
And so then we look at around the world and we look at all sentient beings and we see that although they have at their very kind of heart this wish for happiness, but actually through harming others, through engaging in negative activities, rather than becoming their own best friend, they become their own worst enemy.
나로서 되네 템보드래요 말레스 단다바더 롱진즈도 나저 말이 바데 샤나고 소노토네 단다바드 슈아레 단다이나에서도 마시나 되는도 인양가요.
But it's hard to do the right thing because we are sort of very habituated to self-cherishing and ignorance grasping at the self. These are something that have been sort of our friends for many, many lifetimes. And so because of our habituation to that ignorance grasping at the self and the self-cherishing mind, they have become our refuge. And in fact, they are incorrect objects of refuge. So when we talk about training the mind, what are we training the mind in? It actually brings us to a discussion of this self-cherishing attitude and the ignorance grasping at the self. We are actually training the mind to be able to oppose, to diminish those.
소소 대화 조조 소노토 데케 에즈자 데키테도 데제 실럽 페세 여기 야침보 소노토 게테니 따와이나 지데야가 차데야르 마도 지데카디나 담은디 바지와레스.
So actually, if we look at the world and we look at the causes of happiness, we can see that actually those who strive to benefit others, they become their own friends and the friends of others. But those who are sort of disregarding others and only seeking their own advantage, in a way, they become their own enemies. So whether we think of any human being or any of our friends, we can see that those who try to think in a vaster way, in a way that sort of encompasses others a little bit, right? There is a very big difference.
But
if you look at somebody who casts the needs of others aside and is only obsessed with their own advantage, you see that actually they are always creating and experiencing enemies. And so actually, if we just look at kind of human behavior itself, this will allow us to see very clearly what the faults of self-cherishing are, what the faults of self-grasping are. It becomes very clear.
어단에서 던지지 이자 다 대시 되게 노는 이유고요. 아이자 간조 어주자야 다 로르시니 다 느르시니 다 같이 하지기레스.
And so really, because the causes of happiness are something that we need to cultivate internally, we need to become our own friend. This is actually the real reason for the study and for the practice.
던지시래.
And so connected with that, right, cultivating those inner causes, we will do a brief motivation meditation. And to place the mind in a state of peace, in a state of calm, let us bring the four elements into equilibrium, into balance. So when we place the mind in the state of peace, we try to achieve this equilibrium. Geshe said, imagine a bird with a great wingspan. A bird with a great wingspan can just glide on the air currents in the sky. It doesn't need to flap its wings. So calming the mind is a bit like that.
딜헬레 저피갈 세코로스 세코로 파지 따와히는 알수 디비네 좀 봐야 마고 베려와도 아니 더 발라스 파지 파 자니 다 살다
And when we kind of tap in with meditation to this relaxed, peaceful state of the mind, right? We want to avoid the obstacles of thinking about regrets regarding the past and thinking about hopes or fears regarding the future. Just be in the present moment.
베르무지 그게 싸워 멜론우지 녀석한가 샤도 바지
The mind is in the nature of pure luminosity, but it also has this quality of clarity, which, like a mirror, allows it to reflect or cognize any object.
나그는 로바와 노지 녀석가르 리바도 시바슈나 타네 마리비 녀석다 다가로를 바이노 세코로
And these qualities of the mind, too, when it comes to objects of knowledge, things that want to be understood, it's like suddenly turning on the light in a room. Once the object is cognized and understood, that lack of knowledge is replaced with wisdom. Unknowingness is replaced with wisdom. Sorry.
롱 소소가 네팔 로조도 녀레기 네팔 때문에 롱 친즈도 아주 말이 바티다 세 코로가 노는 바 매와치 저기 좀 바지
I think I'm going to tap in and use this nature of the mind to excel in the study and practice, which will allow me to diminish and eventually clear away self-cherishing and self-grasping. And in that way, I will also be able to contribute to the meaningful, complete benefit of others. But in terms of the being that really has the power, the capacity to help beings in the way that I want to, it's only a Buddha that is able to do that. Therefore, I will strive to draw closer and closer to my final goal, to become a Buddha, a fully enlightened being. And if we look at our situation, we'll see whether we look at the inner or the outer conditions, we have the very best facility to be able to do this. So from our side, we will strive to achieve it. If we look at all of the possible circumstances or abodes within samsara, within cyclic existence, we'll certainly see that actually the current position we occupy, if we don't do these things now, when will they do it? Our situation right now is really ideal. So when we talk about all of the situations of samsara, Geshe said it takes him back to thinking about our tantric sadhanas, right? In the tantric sadhanas, we always say from within emptiness or from the sphere of emptiness, and then things arise. In a way, samsara arises a bit like that. And so the mind is like that too. So we understand that all of these unwholesome thoughts, projections, afflictions, these are arising based on the mind. But through engaging in the practices and taming our mind to diminish those afflictions, they are dissolved back into the mind. So So there is a saying in the text on the root of wisdom that say it arises from emptiness and it ceases from emptiness, which means that things arise from that sphere of emptiness, and then as they disintegrate and fall away, they fall away back into that emptiness. So every phenomena, including the afflictions, they have that aspect of emptiness. But just the fact that they have that characteristic of emptiness of inherent existence doesn't mean that they're just going to kind of absorb and go away by themselves, right? We have to do the work within our mind to achieve that. It's really important also to understand that when we speak about emptiness, bodhicitta, cause and effect, these are not dogmas, right? Empty beliefs that the Buddha taught. In fact, whether the Buddha taught them or whether he didn't, they would just be the truths, the way things really are. So the Buddha just instructed us, though, like these are these kind of phenomena that are here in the world. If you do not want to experience suffering, if you wish to experience happiness, these are the things that you should diminish, and these are the things you should cultivate. In a capsule, that's the teaching.
다시와 동마 매반에 단다 받은가로서 롱진저도 단지 말이 받대 샤라고 겐라고 짓전에 대바래 디고 강에 정도야만도 모른도야 마도만도 와스.
But the problem is, from beginningless rebirths up until the present, we've embraced these minds of self-cherishing, of the ignorance grasping at the self. And in fact, we've seen these minds and their branches as our refuge. But this is a false refuge. And this is why we can continue to cycle from lifetime to lifetime within samsara.
다때 노대야 이제 나노 첨보지 이제 노 들어가서 말아 왔어. 다텐지 와도 여기 체다 아니 손주지 세도 하고서라 아니 다 돈이도 시라 벌써 주바세야 된지 지사레스.
So this kind of pattern of behavior, right, following this in this direction, has been a great mistake. And so we have to rectify this mistake. How do we rectify this mistaken direction? Through transforming our mind and bringing forth bodhicitta and the wisdom realizing emptiness.
다 소소소 다 들레레 지템보서는 배제 또나 땡데데서도 도와야 하레스. 베타 할래야 또 못봐.
So if we kind of apply ourselves and try to understand and practice these, we'll definitely come to a positive experience. Of course, realization, that's quite a big thing, and that may be far off. But before realization, we can definitely experience the benefits of these minds. And it's because these positive minds are powerful that some texts speak of the afflictions as actually ultimately being possessed of very small power, of devoid of great power.
So why
do we say that these afflictions are lacking in power or small in power? It's because they are not at all grounded in truth. Because they are not grounded in truth, because they are not grounded in reality, right? They can be defeated. Yeah. So then So if we direct the mind in the direction of what is true, right, then those afflictions and so forth, they will become unsteady, right? They will become unhappy.
So
there's lots of things to think about prior to realization that we can really be happy about cultivating, actually. Yeah. So when we speak of the Lojong teachings, we know the Lojong means mind training or mind transformation. So training the mind, how? Well, we can say one of the ways we're training the mind here, one of the main ways is cultivating bodhicitta. And we know that in terms of the instructions for cultivating bodhicitta, there are sort of two main ones: the 7-point cause and effect, and equalizing and exchanging self and others. And actually, Lojong texts in their commentaries, they touch on both of these, but we can say that the main method for arising bodhicitta explicated in the Lojong teachings. Is that even a word? Explained in the Lojong teachings is the equalizing and exchanging self and others instruction. And why is that? Because within the Lojong trainings, right, there is this focus on really trying to destroy this enemy of the self-cherishing mind, and equalizing and exchanging is replacing that with cherishing others. And so then whenever we investigate a Lojong or a mind training teaching, whether the 7-point mind training or others, it's really important to consider this equalizing and exchanging self and others practice. And we can do this from the point of view of 5 points. And so the first of these is seeing that self and others are equal, seeing that self and others are essentially the same.
아니 롱 진저가 고 예트만에 솜바. 예 진저가 예테 고 tamaने 솜바.
And then the next one is contemplating the faults of self-cherishing. And then the next one is understanding the benefits of cherishing others and cultivating accordingly. And then the next one is actually a kind of exchanging self and others. And then the fifth one is having exchanged self and others, the practice of tonglen, or meditating on taking and giving. So of course, there's many other points related to this, but we could say that this is kind of the foundation stone that we can place within the mind when we train in Lojong. And then the other aspects of the practice are kind of like the branches of the tree. And if we look at what these five are doing, if we're able to practice these five in a stable way, the benefit of that is that we're able to directly oppose and diminish that self-cherishing attitude. And, you know, it's kind of easy to understand the principle that as long as the self-cherishing or self-centered attitude predominates in the mind, right, we tend to disregard the needs or the welfare of others. We tend to disregard cherishing others. And then slowly, as we become more skilled in the practice, we can really realize this mind that cherishes others. And so we can really understand too what the problem is with self-cherishing here. It's the result which causes us to disregard the needs of others. And surely an attitude of disregarding the welfare of others should be abandoned. And if you look at the relationship within the mind, you'll see that the tighter that we hold on to that self-centeredness or self-cherishing, right, the more we will start to disregard the welfare and the needs of others, right? There's like a symbiotic relationship. And in conduct, it becomes very dangerous because with that self-cherishing attitude, you'll do whatever you need. You'll engage in whatever types of actions you need to achieve your own advantage, even if it harms or disadvantages others. And so also as we study these teachings, hopefully we begin to realize that although that self-cherishing attitude might seem like self-preservation, might seem like a source of refuge for ourselves, that ultimately it is harmful, it betrays us. And then so connected with ultimately being able to defeat these things, we have the two antidotes, which are really kind of the two main points of discussion in this text. So the first of these is relative or conventional bodhicitta, which allows us to defeat this self-cherishing attitude. And the second is ultimate bodhicitta, which allows us to defeat this ignorance grasping at the self. And also, as we engage in these interactions, we see that all of these appearances that arise of other beings and so forth, these beings arise with the appearance that they really exist from their own side, that they are independently self-existent.
Pena melo noji melo ge ne kala ta ye zunge na so ta re ra wa khon chala so ba han ji ba no man ji ba na so la tin chowa yun ya yo re da ma da no wa ji ngi ya.
So it's a little bit like a mirror, right? If we have a very large mirror, it can reflect all types of objects like mountains, rivers, forests, skies, people, and so forth. And at first we might look in the mirror and it appears that those things are actually really there within it.
Yina yo melo melo ye ba ngos shi so na.
Ale milamre melongre.
Melo
sorry. A dream. I'm sorry, a dream. So all of these things arise within this experience of the dream: mountain, skies, rivers, human beings, and so forth. And at the time when we're sleeping, those mountains, rivers, human beings, and so forth are experienced as real. My apologies. Milam and melong is kind of close, right? Mirror and dream is kind of close, but it's dream. And in a dream, right, we can't deny that when an object that gives rise to attachment is seen in the dream, we have that experience of attachment in the dream state. And similarly, if something that causes us aversion is met in the dream, the aversion that we experience in the dream state is experienced as very real.
And
there's really within that dream experience, right? If you trace it back, if you think about it, there's really a big sort of perception that those things that you're seeing in the dream, they are separate from you who are the dreamer, right? They are actually there from their own side.
Ta yina yo ta nga zo ya bo ta chi ni melo melo ya ngwa shi ba si this shu na.
Yeah.
Ta ke do ta sa lo shi ni ya ma des kangam koro melo ge se ti zi ba was.
But if you train, right, in dream practice and you are able to, in the dream state, recognize that you are dreaming, then the appearance of all of those things in the dream being real, that is just going to fall away. So when we train in ultimate bodhicitta, right, when we train in these teachings on emptiness and our mind becomes familiar what is happening, well, first, let us think. When these things appear to us, these different objects and people appear to us, there is that appearance that they exist independently from their own side, that they are truly existent. But what we need to understand is that this appearance of inherent existence that arises together with the object, that appearance of inherent existence is completely false. This is something extra that is imputed by our mind. It is not something that is arising from the side of the object. Yeah. So what happens is, as a beginner, for example, if we see another human being, especially one who we see as attractive, right, beautiful or handsome, together with the image of that attractive human being, there is also that appearance that they are inherently existent. And as we grasp at the inherent existence of that attractive object, right, the problem unfolds. And so this is also the same with someone who we see as really evil or really terrible, right? So whether we see the person as pleasant or unpleasant, there is this kind of pernicious appearance of inherent existence that we grasp at.
Maripa nyondol.
Ale.
Maripa maimba
Ale, loso. And at the time too, Geshe is saying that when we're seeing that evil person perceived as unpleasant, that good person perceived as pleasant, part of that perception, right, is something that may be correct. But the problem is that together with that perception, we have this grasping at inherent existence, which causes everything to be exaggerated.
다 가시 동반이 그네서 때 저보래 동반이 그네서 때 셀 그게 샤소나. 다 대도 년도를 단글로니 요아와스 로니라 때는 저버 시스마스.
Kare, dempa drupagi loti, right? Yeah.
마코런스 빌로니 요아와.
Yeah.
다 dempa 잡아지 빌로티 코슈 슈른 로타소나.
Yeah.
마코런스 빌로 기볼라 때네 저버 때는 시토요.
So if we're experiencing attachment to a person, this is one of the important things to understand about emptiness. If we become really familiar and we're able to bring forth emptiness within our mind, say we see an attractive person and we have attachment to that person. If through training in emptiness, we're able to eliminate the appearance of inherent existence of that attractive person and stop grasping at the inherent existence of that attractive person, the attachment, which is the kind of problematic thing that arises connected with attractive people, it will have no basis for arising. If we eliminate the appearance of inherent existence, the attractive person may still be there, but, right, the basis for the arising of the attachment will be gone.
하고서 어tal 델로토 그거야 말이다. 미는 이나 녀모보 그 바세 세세르다 녀모보야요 말단다.
And one can experience this benefit, Geshe is explaining, even before entering the paths, even before abandoning the afflictions, just with this understanding of emptiness, one can already have that benefit. Yeah. So this understanding of emptiness can be achieved without, for example, entering the bodhisattva paths, without entering the paths of Ishravaka and so forth. In other words, as sosokeo totugeredo. In other words, as an ordinary being. And so how do we get that benefit? It's actually through training in analytical meditation that we'll be able to do that. And so, of course, placement meditation is important once we've developed that experience, but really, actually, analytical meditation is very important for training in method and wisdom. So that is the introduction. Mito nga sanada yeah. So also Geshe just asks you to kind of look over and familiarize yourselves with the 5 points. You'll see different presentations, but different words, but same meaning of these 5 points of equalizing and exchanging. That will really help you when you are training using the mind training teachings. And then as we come to the part in the text, of course, these are auxiliary practices that are all aimed at kind of enhancing our practice of the two bodhicittas, relative and ultimate. And so in terms of where we are, we're on page 11 for those of you who are following. And so last time we talked about, often they're called the 5 powers. Here they're translated as the 5 strengths. So we talked about the 5 powers when one is alive. And so now we come to a discussion of the 5 powers at the time of death. And so we know, right, that our time that we have in this life is something that is not never ending. It is fixed. There's going to come a time where we have to go. And so at the time of death, how do we need to think? How should we proceed?
다 가서 또 응하고 보리 다 때는 저 와도 야지 하레스 된다 그런 맞은두는 저 와는 야 본지 수.
And so Geshe said that actually, as we go through these 5 powers for the time of death, you'll see that there's a lot of kind of parallel with the 5 powers that we already looked at, but the order and the emphasis is a little bit changed.
원나 동성아.
Yep.
원나 원나 친디 류지 다카미 동아 제타 시제나 대제 포이 동아는 동안이 시로지 지수대사.
So then, for the moment of a death, one might wonder about the instructions for the moment of death. And so, Shukjong katsu
그봐.
ale gupare. Yes, so here we go. Sorry. For the moment of death, one might wonder about the instructions for the moment of death according to this tradition. So the root text says, the Mahayana advice for transference involves the same 5 strengths. Conduct is important. Sorry, Gonzang, Tsikshe di la pai. Tikchen poe. So you'll notice in that word, the Mahayana advice for transference involves the same 5 strengths. Conduct is important. So conduct is singled out here. And so then when someone who practices this teaching this teaching contracts an illness that is certain to prove fatal, so page 12, the practice of wholesome seeds is to offer all one's possessions to the greatest possible source of merit, such as the teacher or the 3 jewels. This should be done without any clinging or attachment. Yeah, so you'll see that this power of the wholesome seed in the previous one, in the previous presentation of the 5 powers for this lifetime, this actually came at a different place, whereas here it's coming first. But it's especially the white or the wholesome seed is especially important at the time of death. So in this presentation, you see it first. Sorry, nganso karpo sabun bi top da tong yorebe. Ale tani badi rwa. Loswa tanganso ni badi rwa. Re lotsang. Tanganso kawayo yangarsin. Kabo sabe to ni tandar jen loswa. Yeah. So shila kensa. Tombo kabo sabe chalale na yoje tonche lama to kencho chabala so seno konchesa tonla tenola chaje me ba sha. So the actual application, so the actual application of this wholesome seed is to offer one's possession to the source of merit, such as the guru, the 3 jewels, and we try to separate from clinging and attachment when we do that. 소소가 너무 이내래 소소가 뿌리 이내래 가르 이나 다 보게 예이슈라 다 롱가 여보슈는 거야 그다 보게 슈는 거 도와줘서나 계속 치고야 삼로 탕탕 미미다 줘야지 와라 벤저 소소 라마 요나 요제 가르요나 소소가 뿌리 이내래 소소가 너무 이내래 다 예를 펜바지야 다 로조도 든디슈를 봐 침바테사 yeah. So then Geshe is explaining that actually at the time of death, whoever the benefactor is, whether it is one's lama or one's teacher, to give that generosity without attachment, to understand that we will leave them behind as we proceed. But Geshe said that also leaving the possessions to one's teacher, to one's lama, he realizes that this might be something uncomfortable for people in countries where this is not the custom. So whatever we are sort of leaving behind, we hope for it to be of benefit. So if we're giving to our family, for example, our spouse or our children, it should be so that they can study well and practice well and achieve the causes of happiness, to be able to leave that behind without regret.
다 버게 바이는 다 잡아도 안에 있는 소설로 너무도 다 버게도 드리면이다. 다 채워도 되지 다 자치 모든 다 들어서
For monks and nuns, of course, we don't have any dependence in terms of a spouse, a husband or a wife, or children. And so then in that case, for monks and nuns, we can leave behind whatever things we may have accumulated to benefit the 3 jewels and the community. And in addition, if we give to charity, right, just thinking about benefiting in a bit of a larger way, if we give to any charity which is trying to seek the welfare, trying to seek the benefit of others, that can also help us to practice this power of the wholesome seed. So donating to organizations that are maybe working in places where there are conflict, working in places where there are suffering, this is also something that can be very beneficial at the time of death. So you know yourself what you're comfortable with and what you think will be beneficial in terms of what you are leaving your bequest to, but it should be something that is trying to benefit others, right? And without hope of return is a very important point here. When we engage in the practice of giving, of generosity, we are just purely engaging in that generosity without thinking what I'm going to get back from doing that. So it is said that our best friend as we go to the next lifetime is our previous practice of generosity. It's something that's going to easily bring us a good result in the future lifetime that doesn't require us to engage in great effort. We create that momentum through our previous practice of generosity. So that's very important. But when we engage in the generosity itself, we don't want our motivation to be seeking that advantage. We can just understand this as a benefit without having to dedicate to that. So there was a story connected with this first power about an old but respected monk who was kind of in a very, very deteriorated physical state, but he couldn't die. And the holy beings were asked about this, and they saw that it was because he couldn't let go. There was something that was holding his attachment. Kari? Chagisha. Ale. And it was said that, this is a very Tibetan example. So he was attached to that layer of butter that forms on the top of the tea. If you've ever had Tibetan tea, you know there's that layer of butter. It will stick to your lips sometimes. He was very attached to that experience, and he didn't want to miss his next tea. No. So to help him, his Lama whispered in his ear that if you're reborn in the Pure Land of Ganden Yiga Chudzin, of Tushita, you will be able to have as much butter as you want. And then in that way, he was able to let go, and he went to the next life. So it can be these small things that hold us back. So there's a lot of other stories related with that as well. So the problem is, right, if we leave this lifetime with attachment predominating, that creates the habituation towards attachment and what is negative in the future lifetime as well. It will be a negative projecting force.
단 도와지보뇨래 지키나 샤 도토는 포와 노지 그래스 샤 도고토는 파파와
Ale, loso.
샤지 도고토 데요나
Yeah.
저제 토르 데요나
Yeah.
파 핀도 그러와
Yeah.
핀도 콜 라야키가 말와
So in the Vinaya, in the teachings on monastic discipline, it says that the renunciate should fly to the next life, just as a bird flies from the stone it is sitting on. So the bird does not carry the stone with it. It just lets go and flies away. And so in this way, we see how practicing the wholesome seed is the practice that allows us to die with a relaxed mind. Ale, loso. Kare jisin dan den so the domre dan. Yeah. So a lot of the beings, when we talk about like different classes of spirits, right, different classes of interferers, these are often, if we look in the stories, they are said to be the future incarnations of those who were perhaps powerful kings or people with great wealth who were very, very attached, right? So that places the mind to negativity before death, and then they are reborn in the form of ghosts and spirits. So Trijang Rinpoche would actually often warn some of his more well-off students that their mind of attachment that he could see, right? He could see into those future lifetimes, that their mind of attachment would lead them to be reborn in such a state. Yeah. So from being very attached to something, this gives rises to negative minds, which can lead to those future rebirths. Right. So there's other stories related that we can share with that. So then the next one here, he translates as the strength of aspiration. But if you look at the Tibetan, somebody was saying to me when I give two, so I hope that it's not upsetting to people when I give two possible translations. But if I don't agree with the translation, I feel like I have to tell you, because what's going to happen is if I don't tell you that, then Geshe's explanation is not going to make sense. So this next one here, the strength of aspiration, this is actually the strength of prayer. It's munlam gitop. It's not dumpe top. It's munlam gitop. So that's important for you to know. Then the strength of aspiration is to offer the 7 branches to the Guru and 3 jewels and make fervent prayers of aspiration, such as grant your blessings that during the bardo and in all my future lives, I may continue to train in twofold bodhicitta. Grant your blessings that I may encounter a guru who teaches this instruction. So actually, you can see from the content here that it really is the strength of prayer rather than aspiration. So Geshe is giving it as, you could think of this as the power of prayer or the power of supplication, right? Making supplications to the Guru deity along with these requests. And so then the next one is the strength or the power of revulsion, which can also be given as complete eradication. The strength of revulsion is to think, thoughts of self-cherishing have forced me to suffer in the past, and unless I can be free of them in the future, they will continue to prevent my happiness. Even though I have cherished this body of mine, still it suffers. If I examine, there is nothing in either body or mind that is graspable as self. With this understanding, one abandons self-grasping.
하고 서로 단디로 단지 니가 요르다 진짜 단지 말이 바우서 또 추요래 냐 그니까 요 다 조롱 진들어
So actually, if you think about this particular paragraph, you can see where it says self-cherishing. You can also say ignorance grasping at the self. Either of these would work here, but in the text, it's emphasizing self-cherishing.
선지 바생이 가서 시차인 바스 잘란다고 지소서 지는 뭐지 요나 뭐는 괜히라고 지요나 대파 조마전에 파쇼로를 바이나 선지 바생이 가베스.
So here we come to yet another translation issue. You'll see that here it gives revulsion, but I said complete eradication. So in Geshe's explanation, he said, this way of thinking is like if you have kind of if you have a big kind of collection of like trash, of garbage in front, and there's a kind of sudden force, like a very strong wind or something, and it completely blows it away and it's not there anymore. And so this is a powerful way of thinking that completely banishes the self-cherishing, that completely banishes the self-grasping from the mind.
다이전에 레송아 페비토는 니 바도요 쇼지지 세니 중화 샤고 녀비 넘바토보 요요 샤고.
The strength of impetus is to cultivate the strong intention again and again that one will train in twofold bodhicitta during the bardo.
다 할레비 펜바세야 된 아주 세티 캔사 ኛ리 소노지 또 사는데 고모도 땐데지 휘휘진 거야.
The thing with this impetus is really strange is that if we're able to direct our mind to kind of firmly think of it just once, it will naturally be inclined towards that direction in future moments. This is very important because when the time comes, even if we're lacking in mindfulness and introspection, if we've cultivated this mind with the force of the impetus, because of that momentum, our mind is naturally going to be directed in that way, even if we're lacking mindfulness.
단단에 뚜마니 걸요 고자요 소노 또제바시 대서바이나 타마를 뚜마니라고 노아샤게 될 다 디디파 같이 포토바이나 하고 뚜마니 또야 다래와 침모지야 근데 또메나.
So if we have meditated on emptiness again and again, but in that lifetime we have not realized it, the beauty of the situation here is because of that familiarization, the emptiness is going to arise in the mind. And if we've trained in this power of the impetus, we will naturally be led towards it, which gives us a chance of, if we have not realized the emptiness in that lifetime, we have a chance of realizing that emptiness in the bardo.
다체 토본요를 노직당 아주 야 체키나 돈에 바돌 판로 먹기네 베다.
So there are many people who actually, from realizing emptiness right at the time of death, they're able to circumvent the bardo completely. They don't even have to go through the bardo experience. So this is something actually very powerful here. Ale bardo la peo. So there's actually a misunderstanding that many people have about the life of Lama Tsongkhapa. He didn't take a wisdom mother, so it said he delayed his enlightenment till the bardo. But this is not like the actual ordinary bardo that most of us experience. This is like the preliminary instance of it, something that is similar to the bardo, which he was able to use to meditate upon emptiness, give rise to the illusory body through his tantric practice, and then achieve enlightenment. So, of course, we need to be at a pretty high level of practice, but it's pretty amazing to think that at this very difficult time of death, if one has done the work, there's that opportunity, that final opportunity to realize emptiness. And why is this the case? Because the final appearances at the time of the disillusions of death, that appearance is very similar to the appearance of emptiness. And that is why that opportunity is so profound.
Tiene combito tanga materwa nga ju seni josete chamba shagos.
Then the strength of familiarization is to recollect the ways one has trained in twofold bodhicitta in the past.
Oda yashu te teni yo teni de atere teni teso go yamar ko denro jira so kawa dewa yon tin do ne.
So if we've trained in all the previous ones and become familiar with those, what is the benefit? The benefit is that at the time of death, we have no fear because we have that confidence. We'll definitely be reborn at minimum in a favorable rebirth. Then you don't need to worry about a mo from somebody who's going to tell you where you're going in your next life. You don't need to worry about all kinds of rituals and things, right? That practice has given you that confidence. Payu. So it is said that for the experienced practitioner, entering the future lifetime is like returning to the home of one's parents. So it's a comfortable experience. And if your parents move to a different house, so what? It's like a different house, right? It's just changing from one house to another, moving is not such a big deal, right? So there was this, at the time of the Buddha, Geshe said he maybe wasn't a Buddhist, but he was somebody who admired the Buddha. He was coming to the end of lifetime for himself, and he had a lot of fear. And that fear kind of paralyzed him, which made it really hard for him to kind of let go smoothly at the time of death. So the surrounding family could see that the time had come, but they could see that he was also greatly distressed, right? And he wasn't able to let go. So they had remembered that he liked the Buddha, so they thought maybe we should invite the Buddha to come here and he'll be able to do something to help. Yeah. So because of his previous sort of expression of admiration for the Buddha, they thought this is who we need to invite to help him. And the Buddha actually didn't even need to wait for the letter of invitation, because through his clairvoyance, he saw the distress of this man and he had already arrived there. And at that time, the Buddha said, this head is not you. This hand is not you. This foot is not you. This body is not you. This self that you are grasping at, this I, is not really existent. Because that self or that I, no matter where you look for it, you will not be able to find it. Why hold on so tightly with great fear to something that is not even findable? And then the man was able to relax. He was able to completely let go of that fear. And in the scripture, it actually says that because of the profundity of his letting go, he was reborn in a celestial realm as a deva. Yeah. And this was not somebody who was a Buddhist or holding on to kind of, Buddhist ideas. He was just an admirer of the Buddha who received that profound instruction. So in this way, we've concluded the discussion of the 5 powers or the 5 forces, both from the point of view of during this life and as one comes to the end of life.
다 리포 데워도 어젠다고 다소 리포 데워 세요 말했다 뭐지 타말레비카
Ale.
다 뭐지 타말레비카 소소 데도 데케지기 알았어 니네마.
And so we see with this next paragraph that we're looking at here, it's actually giving you the posture that one wants to take at the time of death. Geshe is just mentioning that this assumes that the person's body is in not too bad shape at the time of death. But of course, this is not going to be possible depending, right, on the person's health.
시엘로는 치카 유예 우드 주 라바 예란 롬바테 테유 추지게 나비 예과라 류요니 조아샤고.
The particular conduct is to lie on one's right side with the right hand supporting the right cheek. With the little finger of that hand, close the right nostril and breathe through the left. And so this posture is actually the parinirvana posture of the Buddha, right? This the way to lie. And so also we'll see from the explanation here, it mentions both the posture and the breath. So we understand the importance of the breath, the wind, the prana here. And what do we know? That the mind and the wind, the prana, are inseparable. They travel together. And that's the reason that the wind and hence the breath is important. Then with love and compassion as a preliminary, train in giving and taking as you breathe in and out. After this, consider that everything within samsara and nirvana, including birth and death, is only a mental projection, while mind itself is not truly existent in any way. Then rest in this state of awakening without clinging to anything at all. Thus, one passes away while combining, meditating on the 2 types of bodhicitta. And then finally, it says, there's the great instructions for the moment of death. None is more wonderful than this. This is the supreme passing away time instruction.
Keep
So Geshe said that it's not stated explicitly here, but we can understand from the general meaning that when we're meditating at this time, we also want to meditate on the object of negation. Think, what are we trying to negate? Yeah. And so in this way, we have covered 4 of the 7 points of mind training from the root text. And so then the next one we come to is number 5, the measure of mind training. So we'll come to an extensive discussion of this in the next session, but in a capsule, the measure of having trained your mind, you know that you've been successful at training your mind if you have the inner teacher, the inner tutor within yourself. Yeah. So I mean, it's even if you have like the outer teacher that you rely upon, if you haven't been able, based on their instructions, to cultivate this inner teacher, then you haven't reached that level of having trained your mind. So when we speak about the bodhisattvas, right, as the bodhisattvas become more advanced, they come to primarily rely upon the inner teacher, right, the inner guru, which is their own perfect practices of method and their own perfect practices of wisdom. So the more that we sort of apply ourselves and bring forth steadfast, stable practice and method and wisdom, the closer we come to achieving this inner teacher. So our study and practice that we engage in, all the effort that we put in, it's really to come to establish that teacher within ourselves. So now we will turn to the 400 verses by Aryadeva. I saw a couple people I haven't seen in a while, so just to let you know that these verses are available on our website. Manoshi was kind enough to find a translation, so they're on the website. Oh, yeah. So we're on page 35, verse 288. Yeah, there is no door to peace, and it destroys wrong views. That which is the object of all Buddhas is called selflessness. So we want to talk about the door to peace, which Geshe is saying means the door to liberation. There's no other door to it than speaking about the emptiness or the selflessness of a person. The view of emptiness is what allows us to go through that door. So when we talk about peace, really, we're talking about liberation from samsara, and in particular, the bliss of liberation. So we all need to achieve peace, but it's important to define peace here because we don't want the mere peace experienced within samsara. Ultimately, we want to achieve the peace beyond samsara. And also from the Mahayana perspective, of course, we do need to achieve liberation from the afflictions, but not just that mere liberation for oneself. We're a little bit greedy. We're like, liberation's not enough. I need full enlightenment, right? We want to go even beyond that. So it destroys wrong views, is saying that through this view of selflessness, it destroys the grasping at permanence, a grasping at inherent existence, a grasping at sort of ethical conduct as supreme, and so forth. It is able to destroy all of those wrong views. So again, Jigta, Nipa? Yeah.
Tata.
Yeah. Yeah. So I want to just outline these 5 because they're important, but I need to get them slowly because it didn't click right away. So the transitory collection, the view of the transitory collection, perverted or wrong views, the view of permanence, holding faulty views as supreme, and holding faulty ethical conduct as supreme. These are the 5 wrong views that are destroyed through this cultivation. So that is the root, right? Is that grasping at the self. So once selflessness uproots that, then all of these other branches of wrong views will shrivel away. So then when we come to the next point, it's talking about cognizing the two truths, relative and ultimate, in one instance for one object. And actually, this is something that only a Buddha is able to do. 상기마도 교말해라. So really important with the language here, in terms of who's able to simultaneously have a direct cognition of the two truths in relation to a single object, it is only a fully enlightened Buddha. Yeah. So some bodhisattvas are able to perceive the two truths simultaneously of one object, but they're not actually able to realize, to apprehend or cognize it. So it's a minor difference, but it's also significant. Yeah.
So
the final view really is this view of selflessness, which is speaking about this lack of inherent existence.
This one. Oh, there. The
unreceptive are the unreceptive are terrified. Chudi yini mingle kyang, right?
I think
so someone did can say chi. Two sasla.
I think that chin them out mainly. Tomba mamba and jipashi. Geshe
was missing one of the verses, but we found it. He said, I found something to complain about today. It's like, I'm not doing a happy dance, just for the record. So as we come to the next one, the unreceptive are terrified just by its very name. What so-called strong man is seen who does not frighten the weak?
So the
word emptiness, and those who don't possess any affinity or imprints towards it, the word, just hearing the word emptiness is enough to kind of bring forth discomfort, unhappiness. Here it talks about a fear, right? So it's terrified because they don't have the merit to be able to really understand what is happening. So really, it's not so surprising that there's not a lot of people who are able to appreciate emptiness or who might even fear it. When we think about really, in order to realize this, you know, how much merit, 3 eons of merit one requires, one needs the assisting practices of love and compassion. To really develop appreciation for it, one needs to possess merit.
This one,
But for the strong person, right, when they hear about emptiness, one endowed with merits and good fortune, the teachings on emptiness will only encourage them, bring forth a courageous attitude rather than frighten them. Yeah, so Geshe not going to that part about scaring the weak, not his style, but we come to verse number 290 now. The principle is not taught by the Tathagatas for the sake of debate, yet it burns up others' contentions as fire does its fuel. Yeah. So this actually is sort of connected with what Chandrakirti said, that he is not preaching this final view of emptiness with the intention to destroy the doctrines of others, but the principle itself, just because of its power, will naturally clear them away. Just as fire might not have the intention to burn the wood, but just through its power, the wood is naturally eaten up as fuel. So don't understand this analogy in the context of harmfulness. That's not how it should be understood. Yeah. So the Tathagata, meaning the Buddha, he didn't profess this doctrine of emptiness simply to impress people by winning some kind of philosophical dispute, right? That was not the main intention. The Buddha's intention was that to be free, sentient beings need to know the ultimate mode of abiding, how things really are. And because they need to know that, he has no choice but to propound this teaching. And through explaining without error how things really are, how they actually abide, then the views of the other philosophical and religious systems will be defeated. But that is a side effect. Yeah. So for example, if you are, let's say that you're hiking or on the mountainside or something, and you don't have access to your kitchen, but you need to cook some food. So when you cook that food, you will assemble a bundle of dry sticks and you will make a cooking fire. So when you light that cooking fire, you're doing that only to heat up the pot and prepare the food. You're not doing it with the thought of destroying the wood or even, harming the sentient beings that may be hiding inside that wood. That's not why you light the fire. You lit the fire so that you can have the food to sustain yourself and your companions, not to destroy the sticks that you bundled together. But as a result of lighting the cooking fire that you need to heat the food, eventually those sticks will turn into ash. So the final view is to get beings free, right? But a side effect of the final view being propounded is that those other views are refuted, disproven. So that's what this verse here, number 290, explains, and perhaps we'll pause the commentary here for today. So Geshe said, let us dedicate the merits with a happy mind, and please, if you need to get on with your day, feel free, but if you'd like to hang out for questions after the dedication, you are most welcome. Changjo semjo rinpoche mache panam chejo chi chewa nyamba mepa yang gone gondo elwa Tongni tawa rinpoche mache panam chejo chi chewa nyamba mepa yang gone gondo pewa rishu Jambe pao jigdar kempa tang kundu Zangpo deyan dejin Deda kungi jetsu dalo shi gewa dida tamshi ratu ngo dusu shebe gewa tamshi gi ngowa gangla jodu ngapa de dagi kewe zawa dikun kyang Zangpo chechi ratu ngowa gi Gangri rawe kowe shinkan de Pendan tewa malu chungwe de Chenre zewan tenzin gyatso yu Shabe zide bado tengyo
우리 관객이 자인이 발라 때에다 뭐를 주고 생지 슬레이나 리치강이 생지강이 간디 여바이나 이데 처바셔와는지 파셔도 있다는 거.
So through the merits that myself and others have accumulated, we dedicate these to all of the sufferings of body and mind of all 6 types of beings within samsara to be completely cleared away, just as a warm torrential rainfall completely melts away the snow. May the sun of not just happiness, but uncontaminated happiness shine equally upon all beings without exception. So we'll pause there. We welcome questions.
So
Geshe also said, like if you ask a question and then the answer isn't clarifying what you were looking for clarification with, please do feel free to ask back. Yeah, it's our duty. My duty as translator, Geshe's duty as the teacher to try to get you the answer that you are looking for.
I was just wondering,
yeah, Geshe says sometimes he maybe answers really quickly. It doesn't touch on all the nuances. So yeah. Sorry, someone was talking. Go ahead.
Hi, it's Gyalse. I was just wondering if you could just go over the 5 exchanging self with other points again. I something that I would like to take into my daily life, and I just went over them too fast, so I'd like to write them down.
Yeah, no, absolutely. Dene dagjin yamche netsu nga den so younger laroches, right? Yeah. 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 Yeah, yeah. Dene sompa. Yeah, yeah. Jipa. Yeah. Yeah. So the first one is kind of, you can say the sameness or the fundamental equality of self and others. That's number 1. The second one is the faults. And Geshe said, as he gives the faults of self-cherishing, he really says like becoming kind of determined through the faults to completely repudiate self-cherishing. The third is the benefits of cherishing others and cultivating that mind of cherishing others, understanding the benefits. The fourth is the actual exchanging of self and others. And the fifth is tonglen, the practice of taking and giving, or sending and receiving. And so that's a starting point, but within those, Geshe said there's many other points. So Gyalse, I would encourage you, if you have a Lam Rim text at home, in terms of those extra points that Geshe is talking about, you'll find these in the Lam Rim, like any Lam Rim text you have, like Liberation of the Palm of Your Hand, Words of My Perfect Teacher, they're all there. And if you don't have Words of My Perfect Teacher, email me and I can send it to you. It's available as PDF.
Thank you so much.
You're welcome. You're welcome. You're welcome. Anybody else? Dave, I see you there. Go ahead. Go ahead. Yes.
Yeah, there's 2 questions coming in from Facebook.
Sure.
Let me get them. Okay, so first one is Bardo the same as astral area, the 4th dimension?
Okay, I have no concept of what that is.
Yeah, I suspected that might be the case. So maybe just a little more elaboration. What is the Bardo?
Yeah, ask them to elaborate in the comments, or if they'd like to email the center and explain what they mean, because that just sounds like a completely different thing. I've never heard of that before.
Yeah,
and that's my ignorance, right? Maybe it's super important, but I've just never heard of it.
Yeah.
So let's do the next one first, Dave, and maybe that person will come back.
Yeah.
Mare bardo sena karere mare konso tsig jendak chigel gitawa dondi davore ininga chigal gitawa hamos. Dave konso kechichi sebo sorchela. Sorry, so let's start with the next one, Dave.
So the next one is so comparing men and women, and the side that you lay on when you're doing that death, the lion pose when you're dying.
Yes.
Do women lay on their left side or their right side? Is it different for women?
Yes. Nganso di chiwa gitu di kabla tompa chom dende ma detang di pudang pumo chikparebes mendraores chikiela chikiyunla sangiduadi kagires.
말 대도 지바르 지바르.
Geshe thinks it's the same, actually. He
Okay.
would think it's the same.
Mm.
Yeah.
야 루일 코로 노시 포야 계시게 왔어.
Yeah.
강가단다 나지는 지바르.
Because he doesn't think that the wind that one is bringing forth at that particular time is different for men and women. I know in some contexts, in some practices it is, but he thinks in this one not.
Yeah. So I guess it would depend on which the two side channels, are they the same in men and women or not?
Ganso tsalung di pudang pumo chikparebes. Tsa yedang yun, tsa umadang yedang yun
자
yeres.
저도 저도 다 보이나 인다만 뭐지와.
Punang-
야
Geshe's-
저도요 같이 봐 봤어.
Sum ane sumgi sacha chipachikyan rebes. Sum ye yun uma.
대도 지바 이제 다.
So Geshe is guessing that the three main channels are the same, but he said that, if you've heard differently, he does have a doubt in his mind. So he's not expressing 100% certainty. But what he is saying is that you can't even say men and women because each person's channels are unique to them. So like even amongst men, amongst women, people will have kind of different configurations of the channels, actually.
다 거기서 또 그래 또다 보이는지 거기 있는 안전마도 되는 거라 저기는 다 보면 너 봤어 또 다 뭐라 제.
And actually, this distinction of male and female, if we're a tantric practitioner at the time of death, right? Like if you're a Vajrayogini practitioner, the body that you're trying to bring forth is a Yidama female form, right? And both men and women can practice Vajrayogini. Similarly, if it's like Yamantaka or Chakrasamvara or something, you're bringing forth a male form deity, right? So they're the distinction between male and female, not so important either.
다 놀래셔 비깔 요한이서 게야 이엔이서 게야 다 내기 쳐봤대서 와라.
So, but Geshe said that he said that he can't recollect them now, but it is possible that this person has seen a presentation of practice, which is saying that whether to emphasize the left or the right side, depending on your gender. So that could be the case. He's not refuting that. Okay, it's very quiet all of a sudden. Does no one else have another question?
I have a question.
Yes, go ahead.
When Geshe was talking about Zangpo and the misunderstanding with achieving emptiness in the bardo,
Yes.
did he say it was like a preliminary bardo? I don't think I fully got it.
Yes, no, let's ask him about that. Je Rinpoche ko tompa ni bardo topsa soine bardo rang mares bardo dang dapo chikures dites teshijaro chesa.
다 배자도 되는 바디텔라 죽은 거 더봐 이사로 어떤 요아레스.
Yeah.
소지고 공부.
Chokdungoju. Yeah.
바디텔라. 더봐 이사 치든지 라원아들이 요아레스.
Ale.
치라.
Yeah.
이나에 바돌 파페요 마레스.
So in the text, it says he achieved the supreme attainment within the bardo. So the understanding that many people have is that, it was in the bardo that he achieved enlightenment. But if you look at what the commentators are saying, he hadn't actually gone to the bardo. He had achieved an enlightenment before that.
바도 바딜리테 단 간전 요래 체 더버서 그이나. 지밀리사 리티 요아슈테도 나오 요아레스.
And part of the reason why this confusion arises is because the body of a bardo being, Julurwa, is similar to the illusory body, which is something that we try to bring forth as tantric practitioners,
바딜리테 울루도 세 참고 거저조선 저바라마도 간조 반만유 그라도 되는 요아 말이스.
And when we talk about this illusory body, we need to understand its basis. Its basis is not the reproductive substances of our father and mother like the body that we have now. Its basis is the extremely subtle wind and mind.
아고서라 다 간조 요래 가게 매나 드리 다 바돌술 파노 그러와스. 다 요래 체 토와 할레비 다 두마니도 든지 조주세 요래 체 토와요라. 든지 울루도 세 참모데 질리리 아지 토야.
So the advanced practitioner Of course, if we're, haven't reached a certain level, then we just have to, after all of the disillusions of death have happened, we just go to the bardo, and that's the kind of next thing. But what happens for the advanced practitioner is just before that, when everything has dissolved, one can tap into the extremely subtle wind and mind, and one can give rise to the illusory body. And we can see that actually there are many beings even today who are able to engage in this meditation. So when we look at Rinpoche, Gyawa, and Sapa when we look at Lord Milarepa, not Lama Tsongkhapa, Lord Milarepa, Gyawa, and Sapa, Kedrup Norsong Gyatso, these are beings who had actually, during the time of life, they'd achieved this illusory body, but they still held on to that ordinary form to continue to benefit their disciples, but they already possessed that illusory body. And why did they do that? Because the illusory body, it comes from the causes of the extremely subtle wind and mind. Therefore, it's very subtle and not visible to ordinary beings. So they thought, I'm going to still keep that ordinary body for a while to instruct the disciples, because they wouldn't be able to perceive me in this form. So Geshe said it's the timing close to the bardo where everything's dissolved and that extremely subtle wind and mind are present. But instead of giving rise to that ordinary bardo body, he gave rise to that illusory body. So that's what needs to be clarified. Because going to the bardo means that the extremely subtle wind and mind, those have been established, but through the force of karma, right, the bardo is then entered. But this wasn't the case with Lama Tsongkhapa. Once the illusory body has been brought forth, it can no longer be sort of projected around due to the force of karma and affliction. So that's the answer. Did we get you an answer there, Marjorie?
Yes, thank you so much. I did.
Great. Dave, did the person come back with a clarification?
No.
Okay. Yeah. No, my apologies. I'm not familiar, but if anyone else knows what that is, please feel free to chime in and maybe we can get an answer. Anybody else?
I have a question.
Listen.
Hello.
So Dinah has a question.
Yes, Dinah, go ahead. Sorry.
Yes. We used the analogy of the stick, burning the sticks.
Yes.
And I was looking what's the important thing is your intention in why you're burning the stick. Is that what you were talking about?
Yeah.
And there's another story about how you look at the ground and there's a rope that you want to use, but it's been burned. So it still looks like a rope, but it's actually ash. So if you reach down and grab it, it's not really there because it's ash. And I can't remember that story about the burned rope.
You want to ask Geshe if he remembers that story? It sounds like I can ask him that.
Story about the burned rope. It still looks like a rope, but it's not really there because it's just ash.
When you try to pick it up, it just kind of dissolves into your hand. Okay.
Yeah.
All right. Yes. Let us see if he knows the story. Dene tambo di nganso di shing denso dabo jabne dene me parne roa nganso shing me paso gi chedu pargi mendus nganso kara so gi che dene kunlong so chikre duas di hako saso ine jenda chik nganso di damya dabo chigere di dabo chi di kanes lagre daba chigere ine tapa di me sene datung napo chigre dua ine so lakpa yar langdu pet mepa chagire dua drung chigere drung di chengire vesa. He doesn't know the story, Dinah. I'm sorry. He said he thinks he's heard something, but it's not coming to mind at the moment.
I think it's how our mind perceives something as a rope, but it's not a rope because it's been burned.
You're not thinking of the rope and the stick, and the snake, are you?
Oh, no,
'Cause
yeah,
that's
that's
a really
another
famous
story.
analogy from I think Chandrakirti, I'm not sure, but that's
Yeah,
a
I like
famous
that story too. Can you
that
tell
story
that
too.
story?
Yeah, yes, okay, yes, we can ask about that. Nganso di tapa dang duldi donda karires, di dang da wochigerero. Ta nganso nakung kapulo da duchigere samne da ditestre shijaro ches.
야, 제도 가서 노실라 마실라 이거나 근다 사리라 타냐 오 임베칼 타파 된다 고치 돼요나 하고서라.
Yes, 하고선.
또 가서 텔라테니 타 드르 소노토니 지바치 모지미도 와스.
So the story with the snake, it's actually more like an analogy. So Geshe said that it's like we walk into a darkened room and somebody may have left a coiled up rope there. But because of the darkness, we perceive that as a coiled up snake, and we experience the fear as if it were actually a snake.
오, 타테 단자 마리 비게 타 네바시아 테텐 지바텐다 오 지레티 와레스.
So that kind of fear is the same fear that the ignorance grasping at the self.
어, 단다이나 뭐도 돈도 좀벌린데 노다서기 자본다 와 지바체케데. 든디게 다 지바테레스.
Yeah. So the misperception that ignorance grasping at the self causes with the objects that we are encountering comes because it perceives things falsely, just as the person who walks into that darkened room falsely perceives the coiled rope as the snake.
어, 나자 마리 바디 가르소 요아레 로지 지토바치 나세아지 저 요아레 예세아 로지 지토바 요아레 소노토네 지바레스.
So what's the misperception of the ignorance grasping at the self? It's not seeing a rope as a snake, but it's seeing that object as having an element of inherent existence, as existing from its own side. And this is what leads to fear, misunderstanding, many other things.
타파 나워지 통가르 마도 소소 노네라. 저기 알레 차 주제지 요아마로 와스.
Yeah.
타파텔라.
Yeah.
저기 쇼 때제지 요아마로 와스.
Yeah. Tetsuki omarewasana.
저 타파테 드마로 와. 아니 저기 차때 저기
남파 tetsu요레.
너마치 메노아치 마도.
Yeah.
코로네는 드세아지 요아마로 와스.
But ignorance grasping at the self, that inherent existence that it perceives is completely false. Just like with this coiled rope, right? It may have kind of the similar shape to that wrapped up snake, but perceiving that as a snake is something that is completely mistaken.
다 대노지 가로서 노아 강가로 싸워 나서 말이 받 손스 코치 얘네들 로지 저 받지 요아마.
So just in the same way that there's no snake whatsoever within that coiled rope, in the same way, there is no inherent existence whatsoever, even though an appearance of inherent existence may arise together with all those objects.
이나에 든지 요아레 소노토네 뭐강게 세아지 요아마로.
But due to ignorance insisting that that appearance of inherent existence is accurate, right? This is what causes ourselves, others to fall into confused thought and action. If you're in that darkened room and you're fearful for the snake, but someone turns on a light and you see that it's a coiled rope there, the fear completely goes away. And in fact, you may kind of laugh at yourself. It may seem sort of ridiculous, the fear that you experienced. In the same way, once you see the lack of inherent existence of phenomena, then the fear that you experienced in relation to the objects of samsara will seem similarly ridiculous.
Thank you. That was
You're
great.
welcome, Dinah. You're welcome. I see another. Loso. And when we see that lack of inherent existence, and when we have that wisdom too, like His Holiness will also have the experience of no matter what sort of aspects someone is manifesting, even if it's harm, rather than getting angry, we will only be able to develop compassion for them. So it will help us with that as well. We think how sad because of unknowingness of how things are that they behave in this mistaken way. So Geshe thinks that's all for questions today. I think we got to everyone's question. We did, right? Yes, Dave, go ahead.
Yolisa has a question, I
Oh,
think.
sorry,
Yeah.
Yolisa. Yes, go ahead.
Oh, maybe not.
Hi there. Yeah, I'm here. I just wanted to ask, I was just thinking about this whole idea of self-cherishing, and the whole idea of fear, you know? So what ended up happening for me was I was working and I really, really thought that I was going to get fired. I really thought that, and I had built up this whole scenario about it. And, you know, my supervisor wasn't thinking that at all. But my mind was entrenched in a lie. And how do you get yourself out of, how do you see the truth when your mind is entrenched in something that's not real?
Yeah.
Because that whole scenario of being in that dream, you really believe that things are happening. And how do you do that? Like, get yourself out of that place of just recognizing, like, what tools are there for me to kind of get to a place of recognizing reality? And my prayer is like, show me the truth directly, always.
Yeah, yeah. Nganzo leka nang lola nganzo di ngunene so mayim pa jigbala tene nganzo netso zumachik nangwachik sogire doa perna ko ngema ko tets nane roa ko leka ne gomba shuswa tene semgi nangla ko leka gi pombo di denden pigire samsung roa dene pombo di denden pigire samne ko nima mombo chik halepe jigpa chambo chik levswa ine jera pombo tudu ngachara parpia gi samso chikyang mes lavswa ine tutse digi nanglo la roa nangwa di levson dene di ngone re samne halepe kange chambo chik chungswa roa nganso di kola kande samlo tangores ane nganso di nangshila tene di lakshe kande shigyeresa
me ta te ol ya lela bodu marwa oda tendigi nesete ina yo ta soso pogel noa jiga ziba dore tene ta te do mo musiga roa memore.
So Geshe said that, like, you're definitely not alone in this experience, that we have this appearance that arises, right? And the appearance of the situation is mistaken, but we really believe in that appearance. So it causes us problems.
Ya nojine tere to bolo loshi yungare tene tesol nogere tene ta yar.
So a mistaken apprehension or understanding arises. Then based on that, we start to have a doubt. And then based upon that, we have worry, right? And suspicion that are arising. And this is how things often unfold just from something that starts as a misunderstanding. So to have that not arise, the first step is to question our perceptions, not just automatically believe in them. Think, is this really in accord with the situation, in accord with the reality, or not? So that is related to self-cherishing, Geshe said, but like to defeat the self-cherishing is not so easy. So maybe let's propose that as a first step, to question. So in your situation, you could have clarified with the person, for example, you could have communicated with the person, or you could have just made room in your mind to think, is the way that I'm thinking about this how it actually is? Or is there a possible other understanding of this situation that could be more accurate? Just leaving space in the mind for another possibility.
Yeah.
And so Geshe said that you may find that when encountering gain and loss, and so this is a teaching on the 8 worldly dharmas, how to think about gain and loss. If you look in, I think in the Lam Rim text, you'll see that the 8 worldly dharmas. These will also be maybe helpful things for you to look at related to this. And one of the best things is just to cultivate the lojong, the mind training, just saying, however this situation is or not, if the situation kind of unfolds in a difficult way, I will understand this as a ripening of my negative karma, and I will rejoice in that purification. So just to apply a lojong frame to that.
Nyapa Mambosa Nila,
Ale.
Chichina,
Kare?
Dichet, Nyapa Mambosa, so Yona Shimares, Kesonda Wachimbuch Rasuna,
Uh-huh.
the Royal Cheta,
Yeah.
Chawangamanos, and Nyapa Mambosa.
Ale, los.
Oh,
It is said that for Lojong practitioners, even when they get a windfall, so for example, like an unexpected gift or property, they have a doubt about that. They don't necessarily rejoice because they think that, okay, perhaps like to procure this, I did something negative in a previous lifetime. So the gas chikyao mepasone di dewe gewola tene yo. So when something good happens, also not becoming completely overwhelmed by that, being too attached to it, but also thinking that this could be somehow related to negativity. So when you're successful at something, also to have that awareness that this success or this thing that's come about, there may have been some negative karma mixed in with what led to achieving it. And also, if we have sort of a feeling of happiness upon achieving or procuring the thing, if we have this awareness behind that, when that thing which is impermanent eventually degrades or falls away, there won't be as much upset. Yeah. So it's really to accept both sort of loss and gain with a similar mindset, kind of applying ways to think about it to achieve that. So if we become over the moon when things go well, that's a problem. If we become totally despondent when things are difficult, that's also a problem. So hopefully did that answer your question, Yulisa?
That was very
Give you
helpful.
some tools. Okay,
yeah,
great.
that was very helpful. Thank you.
Yeah. So Geshe said also, look over those teachings again and again, and also you'll come to your own understanding. Dave, is that everybody? Is there?
Yeah, I think
okay.
so. Yeah.
All right. Well, thank you so much, everybody. We will see you next Sunday, hopefully. Take care.
Tashitele.
Yeah,
She did. I can put you.